vocalist from the New York City area. I want to thank you all so much for joining my masterclass today. I just want to give you a 2-second background on who I am. I've been singing in New York and around the world, touring internationally for about 20 years. Been a lucky girl. I've gotten a chance to visit a number of countries, and in that time, I have been asked to perform master classes. I've gone to a lot of schools in Russia and Kazakhstan and Israel and Amsterdam and Germany, and everywhere I go, I come across, even though everybody speaks a different language, I come across a lot of the same students. A lot of people are very eager to sing, and they love this, they love jazz, and maybe they came into it as an adult and they didn't really study piano, or they didn't study music formally, but they want to know more. And some of them are new in their careers, and some of them are in midstream of their careers. And I find that, like I said, doesn't matter what the culture is, what the language is, I find that the singers are all about the same, pretty much at the same level. They've got amazing ears, and they have amazing minds for music, but they don't know how to go to the next step and begin the process of improvisation. So I have been spending the last 5 years or so developing a program, working with the New York Jazz Workshop in New York, teaching this advanced jazz vocal class, and it really has been targeted towards that type of that population of singers, those who may not be able to read music. Maybe they have the basic understandings of what jazz structure is and how to sing, but they don't really know how to really narrowly focus in on being interactive with their musicians. I studied at the University of Maryland as a classical vocalist in the classical program, but then I took a class, just so that you know, with this great pianist. His name was Ron Elliston, and he played with Sarah Vaughan for a number of years, and he was really instrumental in kind of steering me in this direction of jazz jazz singing. And I remember, just like it was yesterday, that very first class I took with him, and it was a class. He was a piano teacher, and he had piano students, but he was looking, so he put in the music school. He's looking for vocalists who knew a lot of songs to come in and partner with his pianist to teach his piano students how to accompany singers. So that was my introduction to jazz, and I remember the very first class. And I remember the way he described the conversation that needs to happen between musicians. And I was so intrigued. And it was almost as if I was sort of like musically like sucked through a wormhole. And I was so, even though, a lot of the other singers were just sitting on the side, not really paying attention, but I was. And I was enthralled with everything he was teaching his piano students, and I wanted to know more. I didn't know what jazz language was and what I was supposed to be listening for, but that started me on my journey. And he's the one who introduced me to Betty Carter, who really blew the door open for me, and really made me appreciate this lifestyle and this art form. So with that said, introduction to jazz vocals and how to open your ears. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe you know music, maybe you don't. How to read music, music theory. From my perspective, there really isn't any way to get around it. If you're going to start your journey to become a jazz improvisationalist, jazz singer, then I've had a lot of great teachers in my life. One sticks out to me, the great J.D. Walter. If you don't know who J.D. is, please check him out on YouTube. He's a masterful singer, masterful instructor as well. But I remember him telling me years ago that, it was, the art of singing is amazing. And I love all forms of singing. But if you're going to put the word jazz in front of the word singer, and a lot of my students who might be listening, they've heard me say this a million times in my classes, but if you are going to put the word jazz in front of the word singer, that connotates one thing and one thing only. It means that you're not just in love with the art form of singing, but you are a singing musician. So if you're going to follow this path in this journey in jazz vocalization, then it is critical and imperative that you at least meet your musicians halfway by getting the basics down. And the only way you can really do that, if you don't read music, is to at least have the basic understanding of music theory. And that comes in the form of interval training. Interval training. So, and another thing that JD taught me was that, and another thing that stuck out, is that it just made so much sense. Is like, as singers, we bury a melody in our mind, and almost as if it's a recording. So we have these songs going in our head, all these melody lines going in our head, and we have learned it and we know it cold. But if we were asked to step away from those melodic tones, then we get a little lost. And only because we have married ourselves to the melodic line. And I thought it was funny when he said this. He said, it's almost as if you're 2 years old and you're on the playground and you're hugging your mother's leg, and your mother's trying to encourage you to go off and play with the rest of the children on the playground, but you're too scared. So the melody is like that. We're so scared. We're trying to hold on to that melody line, and we're too scared to step away from it. But interval training is key and fundamental into learning how to begin the process of improvisation. Now, like I said, you may not know a lot about music. Maybe you do. Maybe you haven't studied music theory. If you don't know how to read music, that's fine. All of my classes that I teach at New York Jazz Workshop and that I teach privately are zeroed in on how to develop the ear naturally, because it's an important fundamental step. Why? Because conservative estimates say that only 5% of the human population, or less than 5% of the human population, has perfect pitch. And of the 5% that have it, maybe about 1 to 2% were born with it. The rest of that, so that another 2 to 4% of that population developed it under the age of 6 years old. So if you're not one of those lucky few that were born with perfect pitch or developed it as a child, then you're like the rest of us. You gotta learn it. You gotta learn to hear pitches, and that's called relative pitch. Right, and so relative pitch is basically learning to discern intellectually and with your ear the fundamental spatial differences by using one tone as your reference point. So taking a reference point and being able to discern how far away the second note is. Okay. So with that, I am going to share my screen and we'll dive a little deeper. And we do have some people watching live on Facebook and on Instagram and on YouTube, and I just want to say hello and thank you guys so much for joining us. But we do have some dedicated students, and at the end of my masterclass, I'm going to open it up for those students that have joined and have paid to participate if they have any questions. So we'll hold those questions to the end. So I'm going to share my screen and hopefully everyone will be able to see. Give me one moment. Okay. So the title of this masterclass is called Open Your Ears. And I rudimentarily have broken it down to, I think, five effective methods. And those 5 methods, very simply, because I want to keep it as simple as possible, is arm yourself with the basics. And I'll go through each one of these. Develop a strong practice routine. Practice your intervals, practice your intervals, practice your intervals. Key. Mastering the difference between major and minor. And really diving into all the components of a chord. Right. So the first point, arm yourself with the basics. What do I mean by the basics? Well, again, I don't know who I'm talking to. Everybody's different. Everybody's at a different level of their career. So this, I'm going to assume and treat everybody like they're a blank page. And so one of the first key critical components is you need to have a reference point. And that reference point is a keyboard or a piano. There's a lot of very inexpensive ones on the marketplace now. So I think I picked. I'm down in North Carolina visiting my sister right now, and with everything that's going on with COVID, and I hope everyone is staying safe. But one of the very first things that I had to do in order to get up and running as a teacher is I had to find a keyboard fairly quickly. So I found one for about $50. And I think you could probably find some that are free if you're lucky. But please, that's one of the very first things that I think everyone needs, because it's almost next to impossible not to learn these intervals without having a reference point. If you can't afford a keyboard or piano, there's a lot of free apps to download. If you go to any of the Google Store or Apple Store, you'll be able to find a lot of piano apps and a lot of ear training apps to help you learn all of the different intervals. So that's first. In addition to that, another basic thing that I think that it's important, especially for new improvising jazz singers or intermediate jazz singers, if you don't have it already, please hurry up and go get it. It's very inexpensive and it's an amazing tool. A lot of people poo-poo it, but I kind of like it. It's the iReal Pro app. I think it's an amazing tool. If you don't know what it is, if you just go to Google Play, it basically is a band in a box, and you can download about 1,400 jazz tunes. And what's beautiful about it is that each one of the songs, maybe you're working on All of Me, you can actually change All of Me.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I ran out of internet for about 3-4 minutes, so I missed all you have said before for the last 3-4 minutes.
Okay. All right.
I'm in the country. I'm in the countryside, and the connection here is not that good. But so I'm sorry, but
No
these
worries.
are.
No worries. I think that everything that's coming forward, you haven't missed much of the bulk of the conversation yet.
Okay.
Yeah. It was just an introduction. All right. So
I don't see you. I don't see you normally here.
yes,
I see you on the side.
yes, because I've shared my screen because I'm going to go through a quick presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here, train. This is in your screen.
Yeah, this is my computer.
All right. All right. Okay.
Easy.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Your screen sharing.
Yes. And so, as I was saying, this app is called iReal Pro. I don't know how much it is right now. I think when I have an old version, I may have paid $3 for. I don't know. It's very old, but I think the newer version's maybe $12. I'm not sure, but it's beautiful. It's worth the investment. It's the best app that's ever been created, if you ask me. It's got pretty much all of the jazz standards. If you're working on, like I said, All of Me, and you're working on your key, then you can change it to your key. You can change the different styles. You can change the different time signatures. You can practice with just the bass player and turn off piano and drums. It's an amazing tool, and I think extremely fundamental as a practice element. So that's next. develop a practice routine. Yeah, I think that it's critical. If you take this life and this journey seriously, then give yourself a gift of time, and that time is going to completely change your vocalizing. If you just set aside, if you ask me, no more than 30 minutes a day. I would spend 15 minutes on ear training, the other 15 minutes on learning a song. I tried, when I first started singing, I had a teacher who pushed me to, it's like, if you're a new singer, you should try to learn a song a day. Try to learn a song a day. And that is, you can spend time on YouTube, find one song, and find about 5 different, so let's say for instance you want to learn Autumn Leaves, find 5 different vocalists that are singing it so that you get a chance to see different vocal styles, and spend time that way. Just give yourself a gift of time, but no more than 15-20 minutes on ear training is all you need, and best if you can find it in a comfortable, well lit location, all by yourself, uninterrupted, and jazz musicians call it the woodshed, so you're going to be shedding during that time, and slow that interval training way down. Go very slowly, so that you can start to fundamentally hear the spatial differences that we're going to be talking about in just a moment. So let's dive in a little bit more. Practicing your intervals. Okay, we're going to get a little dense, and like I said, for those of you that have joined, if you want to send me your email address, please do, and I'll shoot this PDF out to you. So I'm just going to switch to intervals. Now, before I go into the intervals, actually, this is a PDF that I'm happy to share with you, and I like to. A lot of people say, how do I begin to scat? Where do I start? Oh my God, I don't understand it. It's like, well, first and foremost, from my perspective, is one thing you can do, because being a jazz singer, you don't have to scat. This is for people who want to start the journey. There's a lot of very beautiful jazz vocalists who don't scat. There's multiple ways that you can be expressive and improvisational, and without scatting. You can take your melodic lines. You could be inventive with the melodic lines, altering the tones of the melody. You can be inventive with the words. You can be inventive with the rhythm. Not all jazz singers scat, but for those who do, then the process is they want to become a innovative singer, rewriting a new melody line in the moment, in the middle of a song. So you're basically are respecting what the songwriter wrote, but during your improvisational period, you are reinterpreting what they wrote and writing a completely new melodic line. Now, as a scatter, like, oh God, what notes? What do I choose? How do I? Because it's nonsensical. Everybody's singing in a different language. So let's just start with like simple hard syllables and soft syllables. And these hard and soft syllables, I just created this little cheat sheet, and I have a lot of students, just for fun, just to get their vocal dexterity, kind of, get their mouth warmed up. So these are just basic syllables that you can practice. And I have, if you can see my cursor, I have my students practice straight across, with one hard syllable at a time over vowels, or maybe I'll have them go diagonally, just for, again, this is all just for fun and about building the vocal dexterity. So for example, on one tone, ba, 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 be, ba, be, bi, bo, boo, bra, ba, bray, pre, bri, bro, brew. So it can get a little crazy, but the whole point of this was just to, again, build your vocal dexterity, and your journey as an improvising singer is to create your own style, your own vocabulary. So I just wanted to come up with, just a quick schematic. Do I use all of these tones or all of these syllables? Of course not. But by going through them, I find that I really love the, you know, let me see if I can't share all the way down. Hold on. Oh yeah, there we go. The va. I love the right at the bottom here. Va, ve, vi, vi, va, vu. Oh wow, interesting. Okay. But I would not have discovered the va unless I had gone through all of those syllables, if that makes any sense. So, in addition to just doing it on one tone, I also combine it with intervals. So, let's go into intervals. I think that with the success and popularity of the sound of music, everyone in the entire world absolutely knows the very first the very first mode of the major scale, otherwise known as solfege. Everyone knows it. It does not matter what tone I start. If I was with a student and I said sing solfege from using that as the as your starting note, your reference note, you know, and on E, everybody knows it, right? The major scale is made up of basically an alternating pattern of two intervals. The minor second interval and a major second interval. So which otherwise known as a half step. So half step and a whole step. So the beautiful thing about being a singer, we are the first instrument. We're an organic instrument. Goes all the way back to the deep well of our humanity. That we are the first ones to create music, right? And so our minds, music is a language, and which is why children under 6 really are able to develop perfect pitch so easily, because they recognize, our brains have a beautiful ability to recognize patterns. So if you are from another country and you get dropped into the middle of Paris and you stand there for no more than maybe 15 minutes in the middle of some square in Paris, your brain will start to recognize that the word bonjour is, oh, that must mean hello. Because what, we're watching everyone and we're listening to the sound of the word and we see how people react to each other. So our brain quickly picks up on that pattern, right? The same is true for music. The brain quickly picks up on patterns, which is why it doesn't matter if I'm in Turkey or if I'm in Vietnam or if I'm teaching a class in the middle of Siberia, Russia, or Italy. If I ask any student to take this tone or that tone or this tone and sing solfege, they can do it because for some reason, their brains have been saturated in the sound of that first chord, of that first mode of the major scale. And their brains have quickly attuned to what that pattern is. But if you were to ask someone to define the pattern from this reference tone, a major scale is root, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Nobody knows that unless you actually take the time to learn it. But we all know what the sound of it is. So that's the whole point of this masterclass, is to not just take what you're hearing, but start to marry it with learning it fundamentally and kind of bridge the gap between what you're hearing and what it means, right? So this, it's important to spend time with this, what we call the 12-tone chromatic scales, because between any octave, let's say if you're looking at a piano, C, between C and the next C up on the piano, C to the next C up. You see how they sound the same? Between those two C's are 12 tones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then it starts again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So the chromatic scale, the first most important fundamental scale, is that you've got to start to narrowly focus on the individual space between these interval pitches. What do I mean? In Western music, we have defined that the smallest unit of music is a half step. But in reality, we're not a hard-bodied instrument. We're human instruments. So we have, unlike this keyboard that I'm playing, as a human, we actually have the ability to sing multiple slices of tones, semitones, in between this half. This is a hard-bodied instrument, and it's able to create just these two tones. But as a human, we've got almost an infinite number of semitones in between those two tones. But this process of interval training, ear training, is about marrying yourself to this keyboard that you're practicing with, so that you zero in on the sound of that exact pitch, not the multiple semitones that exist in between the pitches, but learn how to nail right on the pitch, that half step. So this 12-tone chromatic scale, these interval training that I'm talking about, is learning the fundamental difference between two tones. So if I were to ask any singer listening today to sing this tone and then sing this tone, they could do it. Their brains marinate on the sound quickly. Okay, I can sing that. Easy to do. But if I were to play them together and ask them how many half steps exist between those two tones, it's very difficult to do, which is why it's important to sit at a piano and practice these half-step intervals. Now, as I mentioned before, between C and C exist 12 tones. It's one thing to be able to hear a half-step interval, but it's a completely different thing to be able to decipher the spatial difference between two indiscriminate notes. Right. So in between these two notes exist a certain number of half steps, because half steps are the smallest unit. And so each one of these tones that I'm playing are a certain number of half steps, a combination of half steps. So the very first chromatic scale is the first spatial is unison on this chart. The perfect unison just means the tone, that one tone. A minor second is that half step up. A major second is a whole step. So it's two half steps. Minor third, 3 half steps. Major third is 4 half steps. A perfect fourth, a perfect tritone, 6 half steps. A perfect fifth, 7 half steps. A minor sixth, 8. Major sixth, 9. Minor seventh, 10. Major seventh, and an octave. Right. So in this chromatic scale, that I've chart that I've given you, I've actually it's basically just taking half steps at a time. So the C chromatic scale is just walking up every half step. Now, how does that apply to music, right? And so the next most important step that a singer needs to take, the big jump from spending time learning those half step spaces and being able to sing a major second or a minor third, major third, perfect, perfect fifth, minor sixth, that's the time that a singer needs to spend by themselves in the shadow, 15 minutes a day, getting those interval pitches down cold. Because like I said, we're human, and so we're able to sing the semitones in between two pitches, but it's critical that we nail the pitches that are associated with the piano in order to be able to sing with the band. Otherwise, a lot of singers are told when they're singing with the band, I think you're floating away what they mean, what a musician means. It's usually a piano player as they're listening to the sing. It's like you're not really on pitch, meaning that you must be in tune to me as the keyboardist. So a guitar player will look at the keyboard, can I get a G? Because they're going to tune their guitar to the piano. Bass player, can I get a G? They're going to tune their bass to the piano so that everyone is harmonically matched together. Okay, so let's move on to what we call the diatonic scales of the major key. So what does that mean? As I mentioned before, the major scale is a basic mixture of intervals. Half step, a combination of half steps and whole steps. Starting on root, let's just work with C, and on this chart, I've created a schematic of what a piano looks like. So if you don't know, if you don't have a piano at home, then at least you have this on this chart. And the basic piano is broken down, as you can see. You see the C and the D is separated by a black key. The D and the E is separated by a black key. E and F are not separated. F and G are separated by a black key. G and A are separated by a black key. A and B are separated by a black key. And B and C are sitting next to each other. So those two are half steps. So the only two keys that are half step intervals on the piano, of the white keys on the piano, are E and F and B and C. So the diatonic scale. So what it means is that it's broken. So the major scale is broken up, is created of two intervals, a half step interval and a whole step interval. So we start with one, C, and we go up to D, which is a whole step. We go up to E, which is another whole step. What I mean by whole step is that there's a key in between. It's two half steps stacked together. So if you see from C to D, there's a key in between. So that's a whole step. From D to E, that's a whole step. So the major scale interval pattern is root, C. Go up a whole step. Go up a whole step. Half step. Whole step. Whole step. Whole step. And then one last half step up to C. Now, like I said, it does not matter, because our brains have been attuned from listening to Sound of Music, or maybe a rudimentary fundamental introduction to music. We know that cold. Almost every singer I've ever come across, they know that scale like the back of their hand, don't you? Everyone knows it. But here's where we decipher, we start to splinter as a jazz singer. We don't need to just fundamentally understand and hear that first, what we call the first mode, because within each key, in the major key, there's actually 7 modes. And everything we've ever learned in solfege is only learning that first mode, the sound of that first mode. But there's actually, within the key of C, there's actually 7 different modes. So if I were to take all of the notes of the C major scale, which I've written out here in this chart, C, D, E, and I were to continue, and I were to take those notes, but instead of starting on C, I'm still going to play only the tones of the C major scale, but instead of starting on C, I'm going to start on D. Instead of starting on C, I'm going to start on D. So if you see in my chart where I've indicated in the red letters, C to C, now let's go to the very next line down, the Dorian, the second mode. And I'm going to, instead of starting on C, I'm going to start on D. So tell me what you hear. What's the difference between the first mode and the second mode? Still using all the same tones. Second mode. That second mode is still in the key of C, but it changed. Does it sound major? Or does it sound minor? It sounds minor. But I'm still using all of the same notes of the key of C, but we've just shifted those notes slightly. Now, instead of starting on D, we're going to move it up one more tone. The third line down on the chart, we're going to start on E. All the same notes of the C major scale, but we're going to go E to E. Does it sound major? It's still in the house of C major, but by starting the pattern on E, it changes the tonality. It changes. All of a sudden, we've gone from first mode, very major sounding, to the second mode. Changes complete. We're in a completely different world. It's minor. Third mode, starting on E, it's minor. Fourth mode is major. Fourth line down, Lydian. Fifth mode is a dominant seventh. What does that mean? Listen to how major this sounds. It's very major, except for one tone. Which tone? So now try and sing along, as if this is the first mode, but something's wrong. There's one note that's wrong. So something's wrong. What's wrong is that seventh tone. That seventh tone is lower. It's been lowered. So in order to correct it and make this is on, as you can see, on the key of G. In order to make this G major, I have to raise the seventh tone half step. But in this particular mode, the 7 is lowered. So and that's what we call a dominant seventh, a dominant seventh. So the dominant seventh and the 1 chord, the major chord, or major mode, are very strongly related to each other, except for one note separates them, which is why the dominant 7th chord, the 5th mode of the major scale, has a major tonality to it. 6th mode has a minor tonality to it. 7th mode, the one that every musician I think on the planet kind of probably hates. I'm not sure, but most people go, because it's a very challenging mode. It's just difficult to hear. It's called a half diminished mode. Very strange. Now, Michelle, what are you talking about? Major, minor, half diminished, dominant. What are you talking about? Well, in music, there are a number of different qualities to music. There are, I think technically there's 5, but there's 4 that jazz musicians are narrowly focused on. And I have my students practicing these 4 different qualities. What do we mean? So let's just take a look at this very first, actually, I think I can go to the next chart. And this gets a little dense. And this might be for some more advanced students, but I think it's important that everyone at least understand the basic fundamentals of different quality, because this is where I narrowly have students fundamentally focus on, because you can spend all day long practicing the first mode of the major scale, but it won't get you very far. Let's look at the first 5 tones of the major scale. You can do that. You can do that on every single. You can start on every single tone, and you can practice that all day long. But in terms of ear development, it won't get you very far, because it's critical that you move towards quality and the fundamental difference between quality, because right now you're only focused on one of the 4 fundamental qualities, that major quality. And so what that means is narrowly focused. Let's just, instead of playing the first 5 notes of the major scale, I'm going to arpeggiate it. And what that means is that I'm going to play every other note, all of the odd numbers. So if we were to give a number to each one of these tones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm only going to play 1, 3, and 5. So, and that's what we call a triad. And that major triad sounds very strong on its own. It's very commanding, very bright, and a lot of people call it very happy, right? Very happy. So that's the very first quality. The second quality is a minor quality. So again, I'm only playing the 1, the 3, and the 5 of the major scale. So I'm just keeping my fingers on those notes. And in the key of C, if you're going to follow along on the keyboard, that's the C, the E, and the G, right? Very strong. But the second quality, and that's when I went through the different modes of the major scale, and I said, well, this one's definitely major tonality. This mode is a minor tonality. What am I talking about? Well, it narrowly focuses on that third in the triad, the 1, the 3, the third, and the 5. The third is lowered, half step down. So as I went through those 7 modes, I could hear that 3 of the modes had a lowered third, not a major third, but they had a minor third. Okay. And so again, just narrowly focused on the 4 fundamental qualities. This in terms of triad, meaning I'm only playing the 1, the 3, and the 5. The major triad, the minor triad. So as a practice, I have students sit and play all they do is just lower the third by half step. C, E, G. They play that up and down 5 times. And then I have them play the minor triad, where they take that E and they go down a half step to E flat. And then I have them toggle between the 2 so that their brain starts to marinate. Again, we're singers, so we like to bury melodies in our mind. minor triad. And then I'm going to go, instead of number 3, I'm going to jump to number 4, the Augmented Triad. The Augmented Triad is nearly the last 2, 4 and 5. Instead of focused on the 3rd, we're going to focus on the 5. This is the 1, the 3, and the 5. So if I'm playing in C, C, E, talking about the G. The Augmented is taking the 5th, that 5, and going up a half step. So I have my students, again, this is fundamental interval training. So I have my students going in between a major triad and an augmented triad. Augmented. Fifth and final quality that's critical for a singer is the diminished triad. And a diminished triad is taking the 5th tone and lowering it a half step. Going. So I have my students toggle between those two. Major. Right. So spending time with the major quality, minor quality, augmented quality, and the diminished quality are critical ear training elements. And only working with the triads is enough for right now as a beginner. Okay, so I want to move on to the last and final point of the masterclass, and that is how to put it all together. So whether you read music or you don't read music, maybe you're looking at sheet music and you're like, oh, okay, those notes are on all the lines, hieroglyphics to me. I don't even know what you're talking about. Well, maybe not, but what we do have are the chords. Because, like I said, we've got these melodies buried in our minds like a record player. But it's important for you to recognize that music is more than just the melody line. Melody line is just floating there, but the chords that are above the melody line are the harmony, right? And they're there to support the melody line as the melody line moves. So, yes, it's critical that you learn the melody. Obviously, we're singers, but it's, for me, as a jazz singer, it's equally as important or more important that you start to deconstruct the harmony and how the harmony moves. There's a lot to learn about chord progressions, the way the chords move, which is a more advanced concept that I teach privately and I teach in my class. But what I have a lot of students do when they first learn these, when they're first practicing ear training, is instead of just, in addition to just practicing these intervals, which is obviously important, but I have them practice intervals, I couple it with having them practice intervals over their chord changes. So another teacher of mine, the great Dina DeRose, I remember being in a lesson with her, and she's like, Michelle, it's in jazz, it's all about the 3rd and the 7, the 3rd and the 7, the 3rd and the 7. Master that between, and have them, and learn what the sound of the interval spacing from root, from the 1 to the 3rd to the 7. So we often think of linearly. And in a scale, if we were to give each one of those a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 7 is pretty far away from 1. Right? But as a jazz singer, it's important that you don't you don't just think linearly, ascending, descending. You need to start thinking, here's root, and that C, you can, and 7 is B. It's above. But B also exists a half step below C. So you need to start thinking more like an ocean wave, where you can either hear the notes going up, or you can hear the up above C, or you can hear the notes going below C. So, and I like to think and practice in the shortest interval spacing I possibly can, because it just makes life easier. So, as we said at the beginning, a third, major third, is 4 half steps away. Here's root, 4 half steps, the third. Minor third, the minor third is 3 half steps. Here's root. So, so the difference between a major 7 and a dominant 7th is very far from root. That's far. So I like to have my students practice those 7s below 1. Half step down is a major 7. Here's C, and I'm going to go down to B. Now I'm going to have them learn the dominant 7th, which is a whole step down from root, from C to B flat. So, as they're reading their chords, if you're an advanced student, then you'll understand that this B flat 7 we're looking at Duke Ellington's in a mellotone. This B flat 7, that is B flat with a dominant 7th, right? So here's B flat, and I'm gonna go down a whole step. Now I'm gonna go to E flat, and I'm gonna do its dominant 7th, whole step down. Instructions. The songwriter's giving you an instruction. Go to A flat, but don't play the dominant 7, play the major 7. So only go down half step. E flat, dominant 7. We're only focused on 7s. A flat, dominant 7. Go to the D flat, play the major 7, half step down. So as an extra ear training exercise, I have my students just singing the roots, then I have them sing the root with the 7, and I have them sing the root with the third, and then I have them combine all 3 as we sing through the chart. And through that process, they're able to create alternative melodic lines outside of the melody. By just singing the root, the third, and the 7, they're creating alternate melodic lines that they can use as the rudimentary, fundamental starting point for improvisation. And that is the end of this masterclass. And I am going to turn it over. I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to see if any students have any questions. Can anybody hear me? Geraldo? I'm going to unmute.
Yeah, okay. First of all, my connection has been very bad.
Oh.
I had to call, I'm in a country club here outside Buenos Aires in Argentina.
Okay.
So it's a long way away. Second, I find it interesting what I've seen in the on the screen and your PDFs. But the thing is, when you start talking of CD here, I myself, and I'm not a musician, I don't read music, and C, I have to think that is do. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si.
Da. Oh, C.
Right?
Yes,
C.
of course.
Yeah. C, D, E, F, G, G. Okay. So I have to translate into what one is used to follow. Second, since I don't read music, I also don't have a piano here. I can go find myself a keyboard or something, you know. I don't know how. I trust myself in my ear. I have very good ear. So if you tell me, just give me a pitch and a song, and I will sing it you in two different pitches,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And since my ear is so good, I can find the differences in half notes. Probably it would take a little bit longer. It would take an exercise to do that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But when I'm giving classes on history of jazz with
Yeah.
a group of friends,
Yeah.
I'm something I invented myself because I love jazz since many, many years
Right.
ago. I have met Duke Ellington when I was 18 years old. I met Ella Fitzgerald when I was stationed as a diplomat in Sydney, Australia, you know. So I
Wow.
have, as a background, I have many things that I'm very proud of.
Okay.
But my question is now, should I dare to practice singing jazz? This is my aim, you know.
Yeah.
And you see,
Yeah.
so I wanted to listen someone who knows, like yourself, who has authority and can explain many things. But when I come to think of this last part of the program with notes and so on in front of me, gee, that becomes a real challenge.
Yeah. And it,
I go back to the basics,
I know.
you know.
I know. Oh my God, Gerardo, I am so with you. I have been in your shoes, and I was forced, like, I'm very frank and I'm very honest with everyone I study with.
Sure,
I
sure.
don't try to pretend to be what I'm not,
No,
and I
sure.
can share with everyone that I started off like struggling because I didn't come until starting to really deconstruct music theory until I was already an adult, and I wasn't one of these 6-year-olds learning piano, um, and so I struggled, and on top of that, I was in a vocal program that just narrowly focused on tone and in your presentation, and learning songs as fast as you can in my jazz program. And the real and I think that, and then there's a lot of schools that are amazing, like Berkeley and New School, that really do make their vocal students apply their musical sensibilities as if they're saxophonists or as if they're violinists, or everyone, it has to go through the same rigorous program. But I think there are, unfortunately, a lot of music programs that I don't know why. I don't know why, but they funnel us. They funnel us in a direction that steers a lot of singers away from music theory, and it's not really as scary once you start getting into it. It's not as scary. 2-year-olds, think about it, in China somewhere, are practicing their scales, and they get it. They're 2 years old. So why we can't take the time to spend a little time learning this stuff is it boggles my mind now that I've kind of crossed through the veil a little bit, and I'm actually taking the time to learn this stuff. But as an adult, it does take a little bit longer to learn, just the way our brains are wired. But like I said, it just comes down to giving yourself the gift of time by yourself with the piano. I encourage you, if you can, Jordan, get a keyboard. It's really a critical component to this process, because you need a reference. Even though you have a great ear and you have a great mind, and like I said, we're all reference singers. We have amazing, our minds are beautiful instruments. And you ask me, if you ask us, any singer, I think almost any singer, to sing All of Me, but sing it in the key of C, okay? All of Me, or key of F, whatever. Why not take all of me? And then change it, go up step, all of me. Why not take all of me? Or go down a half step. We can do it. Maybe we don't know what a half step means, but if a piano player played it and we
Yeah.
had to shift to a new key quickly, we could do it. But here's the fundamental thing a lot of singers don't know, is that instrumentalists, they don't switch gears as quickly as we do. They don't. They had these instruments, that this guitar, this piano, this bass, these are hard bodied instruments that they have to master first and learn how to manipulate. And so, what our brain does naturally, being able to shift to new keys quickly, they can't do. They have to spend years studying the new pattern their fingers must learn how to play. But we just hear it naturally. And so I think and I suppose that's one of the reasons why singers are maybe they're funneled away from music theory, because they do seem to grasp it so quickly, but they don't know what it is on paper. And when it comes, and the reason why I encourage you to learn is that it's impossible. It goes back to the very first thing I said. You might have missed this. Is that when I first started studying jazz, I had a teacher who said it's all about the conversation between the instrumentalists. But if you don't know how to say hello, like I said, when you go to France and say, you hear everybody say bonjour, it's like, and then all of a sudden you just start going along, bonjour, you don't know, maybe you didn't grow up learning French, but you get very quickly that means hello. It's the same thing for music. You've got to start learning the fundamental differences between the qualities, right? You have to learn the difference between all those qualities in order to have any kind of conversation musically, because it's those those interval qualities and the note interval spacing which will define if you're saying hello or goodbye to an instrumentalist.
Now, let me tell you something. I was watching the other day an interview to Herbie Hancock, and he started talking. I think it was him. Started talking about Miles Davis, and they were playing together once somewhere in Europe, and he started playing Herbie, and Miles says, "Get rid of that butter note."
That what?
Butter, no butter. Butter.
Butter.
Get rid of that butter note. And he didn't get it. He looked at him, and I think the butter note, it's a note that can be scratched, because it's in jazz, you don't use it. You don't need it. You can scratch it. You cannot, you should, not that you shouldn't. It's no need to play it. No, without knowing what you're saying, your logic, obviously, I thought about it, and I said, who can I ask to? Because it's I didn't want to get too much into the depth of a musical thing that I don't have. I don't have the training, but at least have an idea what it meant, And listening to you, the third and seventh, the guidance that I have had for the major lessons that I've given in the first 4, 5, 6, in the critics of this recording that I put to my students, use this language. The seventh, the chord, and the how many, the tones, the pitch. Unless you know a little bit about this, it's very hard to explain. So I don't mention these technical explanations to my students because they wouldn't understand it.
Yeah.
See what I mean?
I understand. No, I completely understand. And like I said, everywhere I go, it doesn't matter what the language people are speaking. In all of my master classes, whether I'm in Europe, Europe or Russia or in Southeast Asia, it's almost as if all the singers are the same. They're different ages and they're different cultural backgrounds, but they're all the same. They're all at the exact same point where they're not encouraged to take the time to differentiate do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and just meet musicians. This is narrowly focused on jazz musicians. There's a lot of singers who obviously are learning the major and minor scales, but narrowly focused on jazz. You got to meet jazz musicians halfway, and you gotta start to apply the same sensibilities that they know to what you know. And so if you've learned do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, then you've got to know that musicians do the same thing. It's just that they put a numerical system to it, and they are driven by this numerical system. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or one again, and
Well,
and right, and
let me
so
tell
yeah.
let me tell you something. I lived for 6 years in India, and I'm not an expert in Indian music, but I have heard a lot, and I
Oh,
have
that's
known
yeah. That's a
some of
different.
no, I have known some of the top Indian musicians,
Yeah, yeah.
and how do they manage to do fusion?
I
They
know.
do they do make fusion.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And you may have a sitar or a satur, some of these instruments. Somehow, when you through the rhythm, through the rhythm of tabla and so on, you have Zakir Hussain, who's number one in the world playing tabla, and you put him to do jazz, and he's just fantastic.
I know they have a different music. Um,
Absolutely,
okay,
absolutely.
yeah, it's not
No,
Western music.
it's
Jerry,
yeah.
okay, so let me just see. Jerry, I know you have to go. Did you have any questions? Did you have any questions or feedback or anything? And unmute yourself.
No, I will need, that information that you send us by mail so I can start reading it, going
Okay,
through. And I look forward to another mm, masterclass or something,
wonderful.
in the future. If it
Okay,
is from you,
okay,
much better.
okay.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome, Gerard. It's nice meeting you, Jerry and
Appreciate it.
Constance. Jerry, do you have a question?
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to say I appreciate how you've organized the information. So it'll be a very handy reference. So thanks very much.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, it's wonderful meeting you. Thanks so much for chiming in.
Hi,
Constance,
Michelle. Hi, Michelle.
how are
Great
you?
class. I
Thank you.
especially I especially like these exercises, so I think you're going to send those out to us.
I will.
I do play the keyboard, and I
Wonderful.
always thought I had a great ear, but really, when sometimes the keyboard gets in my way,
Yeah,
that's a learned thing versus
yeah,
the voice.
yeah.
When
Yeah.
you mentioned, hey, go learn a song a day, I've actually tried to do that, but it's more like a song in a month. Okay. So can you share with me a little bit about your approach to just learning a song? I mean,
Sure.
do you do it at the keyboard? Do you just focus on the intervals first? Any kind of tips like that?
Well, and so the way I learned a song 20 years ago
Mm-hmm.
versus the way I'm learning a song today are two different ways. 20 years ago, I would listen to I would listen, it was records and CDs, so it's a different kind of thing. But I would listen to as many different versions of a song as I possibly could. And because I was really all about jazz, I was just narrowly focused on jazz style and how different, all the different stylistic approaches to singing. And so I wanted to, how did Betty Carter sing it versus Carmen McRae versus Nancy Wilson versus Ella, whatever. So I was just narrowly focused on that. And but now that I'm in New York, pretty much all the geniuses around the planet seem to be magnetically attracted to New York, and they flock here. And you can step over musical geniuses in the street. It's kind of that madness in New York City. And so when I moved to New York 10 years ago, I was like, okay. And I thought I knew what I knew, I thought I knew a lot, oh, I don't
You
know.
do. I've heard you. You're great.
Thank you. Um, but to actually interact with a lot of these musical minds, I knew quickly 10, 12 years ago, I was like, I need to scrub my stuff down a little deeper. And so now, the way I learn a song, a lot of students ask for my methodology of learning a song. Again, I look at it from 2 points of view. Yes, there's the I so the first thing that I do in this order is I first review the chart, and I want to understand the roadmap of the song. So that's a quick analysis. A lot of people look at the form. So is it A B A? Is it A B? Is it A B A B? Whatever the form is, I want to fundamentally understand it. So that's number one. A lot of people's like, you don't learn the melody first, you don't learn the words. No, that's the last thing I learn. The last thing I learn is the melody and the words. First thing I want to know is, where is the song going? What is the roadmap of the song? And it's beyond the form. AABA is just the beginning. It's just scratching the surface, right? And so again, this is kind of an advanced. So
no, that's good. This is where I am. Yeah.
Right. And so so for those who are listening, so just in case you're like, what are you talking about? So in addition to wanting to understand the basic roadmap, I want to understand the harmonic roadmap. I will
chord progression. You
What's
mean?
that?
Do you mean the chord progression, or?
Yes, absolutely. So before I even go to the chord progression, I want to just quickly scan the page, and I go through every single chord, and I just I do a mental blocking, major minor. I want to understand the major minor tonality of the song, right? Where the chords are going. This is major, this is minor, this is major, this is minor. Okay. And then in addition to that, so that's next. And then in addition to that, I start to look at how many times does this song change keys? Because therein lies the ground found, because you're if you're a vocalist and you're not a piano player, vocalists don't have the luxury usually, actually almost never, to have their face buried in a piece of sheet music when they're on stage, because we're also entertainers. We also have that element to us, right? Most of us anyway. And so so we don't get the luxury of staring at a piece of sheet music, constantly reminding us the shifts, the constant harmonic shifts in a song. We've got to memorize that stuff, right? And so in order to do that, I want to study how many times a song changes keys, right? And so the next thing I look at is I look not just the quality of all the chords, but then I start to study and where exactly all the minor chords are, because the minor chords are the beginning of a 2-5-1 progression, right? And so the minor chords are like the ding, are like dead giveaways. Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
Potential key change, right? And so,
Yes.
right. And so if you're looking at a song in the key of C, and so the expected chord progression you're looking for, whether it's a discrete chord progression of a 2-5-1, or maybe a splintered chord progression of a 2-5, 2-5, 2-5, whatever it is, So if you're looking at a chord progression, so you're looking for the pattern D minor, G7, C major, right? And so looking at so all of a sudden I'm scanning and I see G7, C major, G7, C, and then I see D minor to G7. Okay, we're still within the house of C major. Oh, we're still within the house of the key. Okay, all of a sudden, boom, G minor jumps out. I'm like, whoa. G7 is in the house in the key of C major. G minor's not. So this is the first indication that we've moved to a new key. And so I'm a singer, and I've got to memorize this stuff. So I have to use all these different devices. And so when I first started doing this, I would take like 2, 3, 4 different colored highlighters, and I would highlight in one color where I knew confidently a stretch there would be a stretch of maybe 4 measures or maybe 8 measures that are clearly in the key of C. I would highlight those chords in that color. And then maybe briefly the song would slip into a new key just for color, because it's boring. If, the song would be boring if it was, you know what I mean? Like over and over and over again. And so songwriters know that they gotta go somewhere else. And so, let's imagine you're riding a bicycle in the key of C, and then and then the songwriter just briefly goes up a hill and down. So that's like what a key change is, right? So you're riding your key of C, keys up and down, right? So every time there's a key change, so some songs are like this, ooh, and so, like I just the other day I had a student who was deconstructing Indian Summer. What a song! They're like,
Oh.
I don't understand. I can't, my brain can't hear this melody. I can always float away. It's like, yeah, well, because the song is a major tune, but it has a strong minor tonality to it and it's changing keys a couple of times. And she's like, huh? Oh, so you got to take the time to really deconstruct that roadmap and to see when it changes keys and where it goes. Because as an improviser, okay, because again, we're only working on the first, on all, if you're all within the same key, then it's all the same notes of the C major scale. If it's in the key of C, then that at least for 8 measures or 4 measures, I can improvise in the key of C and I'm cool, if it comes down to it. But as it moves to a different key, all of a sudden, if you're improvising, I know that when I go to the bridge, because I've deconstructed the song, it shifts to the key of F. And maybe the last day goes back to the key of C, whatever it is. So that's my, and then I move on to the more simple stuff of just memorizing the melody, and I look at the lyrics. And so, but I don't want to poo-poo style, because this has been all about ear training, and so, and stylistic approaches to song, which to me is heavily weighted, in my opinion. I don't poo-poo it. I don't just like disregard it. But this particular masterclass was just narrowly focused on ear training. But stylistically is a whole nother headspace for learning a song. And I really do analyze the lyrics. I try, because again, we have to memorize all this stuff. I try and put myself in the storyline. What is the storyline? Who's the protagonist? You know what I mean? I really go through the motion to say, from what point of view am I singing this song? Am I talking about someone? Am I the person? Am I the one who's been victimized, or am I the one being loved? Whatever it is. And I really try to pour myself, because I really do enjoy the whole art of, I could be singing to 10 people. I could be singing to 10,000 people. Doesn't matter, because my whole driver is to find some way to get into the the chest of the people listening, grab their heart and squeeze, and I want to do that musically. I want to do that emotively, and emotively that, it's a difficult thing to do. So so you really have to convey a story. And stylistically, there's a lot of different, which is a whole nother masterclass, but so jazz stylistic, like if you were to take over the last 100 years, all the jazz singers, and squish them into one body, and then cherry pick the best of what they do, what they all tend to have in common. Well, then again, that's a whole nother masterclass. And I narrowly focus on trying to isolate what those things are, that are very specific to jazz, like not a lot of vibrato, holding long tones, holding the vibrato just to the end of a phrase, going to the end of the phrase and being scalular at the end of your phrase over a whole note, forward phrasing, backward phrasing. There's a lot of stylistic ideas that a lot of jazz singers have applied over the years that could be a whole nother class. So if that's helpful.
Very, very helpful. Thanks again. And when you're doing any of this, are you documenting any of it? Do you ever
What do you mean?
write down? Would you ever write down a line that, like, I don't know, when you come up with your own melodic phrase over a change, you'll do that? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, again, a lot, because I don't know the scale, like the skill level, a lot of people. So I didn't really want to go into this, but at the beginning, I don't know if when I was talking about like the different hard syllables, soft syllables combined with vowels.
Yep.
Yeah, I honestly, like I had just the last week, I had some students write, look at that list and come up with 5 5 new melodic lines over scat syllables that they can apply in multiple songs. And that was a challenge. They were like, oh my God. So they had to, and he didn't have to do all 5, but I wanted them to say, okay, I'm going to create five
Yeah.
lines that are applicable in any song, but they will become my signature line. So one
Yeah.
example that I gave them is, this is my little cheat, is
Yep.
and the so you're familiar with the minor scales, right?
Yes.
I love my personally, I don't know why people love the melodic minor scale. I think it's kind of boring compared to the harmonic minor scale, which is gorgeous to me, right? And it's
Uh-huh.
just a simple little thing, but I will so so let's say uh let's do A.
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And
Yeah.
so one signature line that I apply over a lot of my minor tunes is, instead of scalular just going up and down the scale, what I'll do is I'll do the first 4 tones of the scale, and then I'll do the last 4, followed by the last 4. Sorry, horrible piano player. So
Ah.
yeah, and so if you come to any of my shows, so I was like, oh, that's a Michelle Walker lick.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
do
this
that,
is great.
I do that in, like, I don't know, autumn leaves a lot,
Ooh.
So you see what I mean? And all I did was
Yes.
the first 4 notes of the harmonic and the last 4 notes of the harmonic scale.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
These are things that you would be teaching in individual classes, or do you have an upcoming workshop that
Well,
would?
yeah, through New York Jazz
Yeah.
Workshop,
Mm-hmm.
they have, it's summertime, but and of course with COVID,
Yeah.
we've moved to an online format.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I have reserved Thursday nights as a teaching night, and
Okay.
I also, but a lot of these details are really, because everyone's different, and so I kind of have to take a more general approach to learn. Like, a lot of people are not ready for the different modes of the harmonic scale,
Uh-huh.
you know. Um, and so a lot of that stuff really is, I spend more of that time in a more privatized setting,
Okay.
in a one-on-one lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Okay, thanks again.
Where are you from, Constance?
Okay, so I spend half the year in up there in Westchester,
Nice.
but I got stuck in Arizona over the pandemic. So I'm
Yeah.
I'm calling in today from around the Phoenix area.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, I know Jocelyn. I've taken her
Oh,
class
nice.
a couple of times, but always been a little intimidated to come to yours. But
No.
so this has been really great, and I've been working a lot on my ear. So
Yeah.
okay, we'll probably talk again then.
Yeah, I would love anytime. I sent you my email address if you got that in the chat section. So reach out to me anytime, and I know
Okay,
you can discuss, possible private lessons if you want
yeah,
with the
cool,
guys at New York Jazz Workshop.
absolutely, that's great. Thanks again, Michelle.
You're welcome,
Bye
Constance.
bye.
Nice meeting you.
Am I the last to go?
I think
Is
so.
that where we're going to hang up now? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Push the leave button.
I got.
See ya. Michelle Walker, New York Jazz Workshop. Michelle Walker, New York Jazz Workshop.